These were the top 20 most expensive championship signings in the summer transfer window, and in today's video we're going to be ranking them into the following tier list. Judging them on their season so far, they've either been a flop, meh, decent, goodbye or great signing. Without any further ado, let's hop into this one. We'll go ahead and do the ranking from cheapest to most expensive, going through the top 20 signings in the summer, starting out with Carlton Morris making that move over to Luton Town. I've got to say, I think it's been a great signing. 8 goals, 3 assists up until this point in the season. He is Luton's top goal scorer. Not just the goals he's brought to that side, but his overall play I think has been absolutely fantastic, sort of taking that goal scoring burden away from Adebayo and Cornick a little bit, and overall I think for the money they paid for him, he's turned out to be a great signing so far. Next then to Harry Darling at Swansea, and to be honest, I'm a little bit conflicted on this one. He had a brilliant debut for Swansea. I think he scored that wonder goal against Rotherham and has had an eye for a goal so far this season, 3 so far in the Championship, but he's a defender and there have been a hell of a lot of defensive mistakes in his game so far this season. I think that has been an area of vulnerability for Swansea, the individual mistakes at the back. He had a bit of a nightmare game against Preston, to be honest, when we played them, and I just got to see him up close and personal in the flesh. There are redeeming factors with him, but with the amount of individual mistakes this season, I'm between decent and meh. I think I'm edging towards meh at the moment. Came in with a massive reputation. Don't get me wrong, very good on the ball, can have that physicality at times to go through someone, but with all the mistakes that have been in his game up until this point, I think he's been a bit of a mess signing. Daniel Ballard in at Sunderland. I'm going to chuck him into the middle. I'm going to say decent. We've not really seen a whole lot of him in the Sunderland shirt so far this season due to injury, so we've not really got a massive sample size to be judging him, but going off his previous track record, how good he's been at this level previously, there's no way I can drop him any lower than decent, but we've just not got to see that much of him so far, which is a shame. Zian Fleming of Millwall, you are going straight up there into the top tier. A wonderful signing. 8 goals up until this point. He is Millwall's top goal scorer, and it's quite incredible really how Millwall have been able to almost effortlessly replace that output of Jed Wallace. Towards the back end of last season when Wallace's contract was expiring, we all had those conversations about how hard Millwall would actually go ahead and find it without that creativity in that side and a little bit of dynamism, but Fleming has just come in and instantly adapted to the level. I saw him come to Deepdale, score a hat-trick against us, was absolutely prolific in that game, and just is that little bit of dynamite that Millwall have in the final third. In a Gary Rowett system, they like to be quite resolute, tough to break down and things like that, but someone who just brings that extra X factor in the final third has been him so far this season, and yeah, great signing no doubt. Matt Clarke in at Middlesbrough, I'm going to put it into the decent category. Another one similar to Daniel Ballard, who we've just not been able to see loads of in the Middlesbrough shirt so far this season. I think he's been struggling with a few different niggles and injuries and things like that, and for that reasoning we've not got to see all too much of him in the Middlesbrough shirt up until this point, so I hope that he does manage to put all those injuries sort of behind him as we do come out of this international break and we get into the business end of the season, because yeah, from his days at West Brom, Derby in particular, really good championship defender there. Next then to Scott Twine in at Burnley. For the sake of it, I've got to put someone in that flop category. We've just not seen him play this season, have we? He's had 20 minutes of football, had a cameo appearance on that first game of the season, and then since that point has been out with an injury. I mean, absolutely no doubt that when he does get back, fully fit after this international break, he'll absolutely fly up this table. Burnley have got their recruitment absolutely spot on this season, and I'm, not doubting for one second that, he's not a very talented footballer who will bring something to this Vincent Kompany side in the second half of the season, but if I'm judging these signings on purely what we've seen so far, the guy's been injured all season, so for that reasoning I'm going to put him into that flop category. But yeah, I am hopeful that we do get to see the best of him in that second half of the season, because the player that Burnley bought from MK Dons did look incredibly promising. It has just been a shame that we've literally not been able to see any of that so far. Muric in at Burnley, going to put him into the goodbye category. Really solid goalkeeper in the Championship so far this season. I think suits Vincent Kompany company and what he's trying to do absolutely down to the ground. There probably have been a few nervy moments in there, but I think that comes with the territory of buying a goalkeeper for his sort of distribution and things like that. Absolute giant when you see him up close and personal as well. Really goes ahead and fills out that net. But yeah, Muric so far this season, definitely in that goodbye category for me. Just suits Burnley and their philosophy. Matthew Hoppe in at Middlesbrough. I mean, on a similar reasoning to Scott Twine, I could potentially throw him into that flop category, but I'm going to put him in meh so far this season, purely for the fact that we've just not seen enough from him in the Middlesbrough shirt up until this point. All 5 of his championship appearances have come from the bench, and we've not really had a great sample size of matches to go ahead and judge what he's all about, and I'm sure that that will probably come in the second half of the season. But yeah, the amount of money that Middlesbrough have outlaid on him, you would expect more regular starts to be coming around the corner for the American striker. Next then for Hoppe and Tufan in at Hull City. This should be an interesting one, because Tufan was quite a controversial signing in the summer. You know, everything that Watford fans were saying about him, how sort of unfit and laboured he looked last season in the Premier League while he was out on loan there. So Hull fans had a little bit of that baggage to sort of take into consideration with this signing, and to be honest, up until this point in the season, I am a little bit conflicted on this one. We've even had some reports that I saw the other day about a potential link to the Serie A coming out in January as well, which would be interesting. But Tufan to me sort of does feel like a little bit of a luxury player who, when he wants to, when he's in the right frame of mind, does have it in him to turn it on and be a match winner in the Championship, and we have seen those moments of quality from him in a Hull City shirt so far this season. But perhaps for the money they spent on him, you know, his wage packet as well, maybe those moments of quality have just been a little bit, you know, too inconsistent up until this point in the season. But everything taken into consideration, I'm going to put him in the middle. I'm going to put him into a decent, the decent category. I think that when he's at his best, he can be very good technically, got absolutely everything to thrive at this level, but there's just sometimes when I watch him and I do question, don't know whether it is fitness or desire, you know, that work ethic sometimes just it doesn't quite seem to be there. But when he is switched on, he can be a game changer. So I'm sort of conflicted on that signing at the moment, if I'm honest. One signing that I'm not conflicted on though is Josh Cullen in at Burnley. I'm going to put him right into that great signing category. Been one of the best midfielders in the Championship up until this point. I think he brings absolutely loads to this Burnley squad. All the endeavour off the ball, the energy, the quality on the ball as well. I think that since we last saw Josh Cullen in England, I think he's really gone ahead and refined his game, his final product. His passing's a little bit more crisp now than it was last time as well, and working in this Vincent Kompany system, I just think absolutely suits him down to the ground. So for me, great signing, no complaints with that one for me. Darko Chernlov in at Burnley. I'm going to chuck him into the meh category, another one who I've just not been able to see all too much of so far this season. All of his appearances for Burnley up until this point have come from off the bench, and he's another player who I'm expecting to play maybe a bit more of a substantial role in that setup in the second half of this season after the international break, when he's had a little bit more time to, you know, work on the training pitch with Vincent Kompany and this squad, because there have been a few flashes, but I've just not seen all too much of him yet. Marcus Forss in at Middlesbrough. Difficult one to judge, because under Wilder, not quite sure where this signing was going, but under Michael Carrick, I think he sort of reinvigorated Marcus Forss and a little bit of a fire under his belly. 4 goal contributions so far this season, nothing outstanding, 2 goals, 2 assists, but he does offer more than goals. His endeavour, pressing off the ball, work rate and things like that, and I think that more recently under Michael Carrick, you know, that partnership that started to form between him and Akpom up front, I'm going to chuck him into the decent category. Still think there's the chance that he maybe rises through the ranks as well as the season goes on. I think that working under Carrick maybe will suit him a little bit more than Wilder. But yeah, sort of in the middle with Force at the moment, being a bit of a hit and miss one up until this point, as probably Middlesbrough have been in this season. Marcelino Nunes in at Norwich. I'm going to put him into into the goodbye territory, I think. Would have had him in that great signing category if he carried on with his trajectory that he showcased over that first month or so at Norwich, when he was absolutely on fire, firing on all cylinders. Such an intelligent player who was making that Norwich side tick. Brilliant range of passing, great little technical player in the middle for Norwich to go ahead and dictate things. But for whatever reason, the last month or so championship action that we had just seemed to fizzle out somewhat. Whether that was a case of, I know he had a little bit of a niggle at one point, didn't quite seem to be the same after that, and I'm hoping that after this international break will be reinvigorated a little bit, although I do know he has been featuring for Chile. But yeah, no doubt very talented player, on his day one of the best midfielders in the championship, but just went off the boil a little bit towards the end up until the break, but no doubt still a great signing for Norwich. Cynic in at Hull, I think, is a player who came with a fairly big reputation, given his sort of record in Turkey, how exciting he actually looked there, and the money that Hull also outlaid for him as well. He is a player who we've not seen all too much of up until this point, because the vast majority of his appearances have come from off the bench, but even in those cameos that he has made off the bench, I'm between met and decent. I think I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say decent. He is a player who, wants to get on the ball, wants to make things happen, and for whatever reason just hasn't been able to nail down a consistent starting spot in that Hull side so far this season. But when he is able to do that, I think we'll maybe see a little bit more dynamism from Hull, perhaps. I do think he has plenty to offer. He's just not quite been able to showcase all of that so far this season, but we have seen it in flashes from him so far this season, but with most of his appearances coming off the bench, it's been tough. To be fair, Manuel Benson, the majority of his appearances for Burnley have come off the bench this season, but I'm going to put him down as a great signing. Honestly, in the flesh, one of the best players that I've watched this season come to Deepdale. Absolutely terrorised us when Burnley came to Preston. One of the best unique sort of dribblers, I'd say, in the championship. His close control is absolutely second to none, and the goal contributions he's been able to rack up so far this season, considering that 12 of his appearances this season have come from off the bench. He's been the ultimate impact sub in the championship so far this season, and if I'm being honest, I think he starts for virtually everyone else other than Burnley, but he's been absolutely brilliant, great to watch and on the eye, and look, the stats also go ahead and back that up. And as an impact sub, what he has been this season, phenomenal business there from Burnley, I have to say. Asarori in at Burnley, another one who I'm just going to have to put in that great signing category. It's absolutely stockpiled by Burnley signings in there at the moment, but I can't deny the quality that he showcased so far this season. Had a brilliant impact on that Burnley side, such a good technical player, and deservedly so. Got his call up to the World Cup squad in the end, and the manner in which Burnley have gone about their business in the summer, the way they've so sharpishly transitioned to this new brand of football under Vincent Kompany is a real testament to him as a coach, the recruitment strategy, and how they've absolutely knocked it out of the park during the summer window. Saad Mandesh in at Hull City. We can't really judge him on what we've seen from him so far this season. He's only played 4 matches and has been out of the majority of the season so far with, I think, a hamstring injury. So really looking forward to seeing him when he is back. We saw a little bit of him in the second half of last season at Hull as well, but judging him from the summer onwards, we've not really got all that much to go off because he's had that quite long-term injury. So for the time being, I'm going to put him into Med, but I'm sure that he'll move up the gears when he is back and fully fit. Anel Ahmedhodzic in at Sheffield United, straight into that top category. I think when fully fit, probably been the best central defender in the championship so far this season. I think he's got so many attributes to his game, and when Sheffield United were laying down the sort of money that they were paying for him, I think they were probably expecting a Rolls Royce of a centre half, and in the end they've absolutely got that in the championship. I think he's represented great value for money for the assurance and quality he's brought into that back line this season, and yeah, one of the best, if not the best, defenders in the league this season for me. Next then, for Kumbeyo in at Watford, and I've not been massively sold on him so far this season, I have to be honest. I sort of understand what his skill set is, in and around the box. Has got a few goals so far this season, 3 up until this point, but when I look at Watford's other forward options, I just think they have so much more with, you know, João Pedro linking up with Keenan Davis and some of those other forward options than they do when they have Vale on the pitch, if I'm honest. I don't think he's a great stylistic fit into this Watford side, and considering the money they paid for him, around about £5 million to get a striker who for me isn't an ideal fit into your system, and other than some of those goals in and around the box, I don't think he's offered a great deal to this side so far this season either. I do think that maybe he's been a little bit of a flop so far this season, not particularly at a fault of his. I just think it was poor planning by the club to sign a striker who doesn't particularly fit the mould very well there for me. Some Watford fans may disagree with that one there, but me personally, not been overly impressed with what I've seen so far this season, considering the fact that Watford spent £5 million on him. That's the threshold that I'm judging him here, you know, putting him into that category. You know, there are worse strikers in the Championship, but yeah, not being completely sold on him, to be honest. And then finishing it off with Gabriel Sara, a little bit conflicted on him as well. I'm sort of between decent and goodbye, if I'm honest. I'll bunk up that goodbye category for the time being, because I think that at his best, when we have seen a little bit more of him on the pitch, obviously he's been sort of in and out of that Norwich side, sort of been gently eased in after you know, he has had that adaptation period to go ahead and get used to after coming over from South America. But when he has had those moments, you know, linking up with some nice play on that right hand side, and we see what he's all about, undisputably Norwich do have a quality player on their hands there. It's just been, you know, there has been a little bit of inconsistency there, and in the second half of the season I'm hoping we see that on a bit more of a consistent basis, but in those flashes he has looked really quite exciting. There we have it though, guys. Those are my rankings for the most expensive Championship signings in the summer and how I think they've all sort of fared so far this season. If you disagree with any of these shouts, do let me know in the comments down below. Apart from that though, guys, that will wrap it up for today's video. If you did go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like and do stick around and subscribe for some regular Championship content. Apart from that, guys, I'll see you all in the next one.